My name is Anna Marie Smith. I've been living in Desert Hot Springs for 5 years. I lived in a broken home, came from a long life of just being broken. And my mom and my dad was always constantly fighting, nonstop. I seen the drug action where they were constantly doing drugs. When we were taking a shower, my uncle came in and was bathing me and my sister. My sister got out when I was still bathing. My uncle molested me. So I told my dad. My dad didn't believe. My grandma and grandpa didn't believe. I told my aunt and my mom when she got home. So my mom was all upset and they thought I was lying. My brother, his wife, his brother-in-law raped me with some friends, and I told him I had markings all over my legs, all over my arms with their names. And my brother kept on not believing. And I told him that I have all the markings. I had their names all over my body. I felt dirty. And her brother kept on saying, oh, well, she's a liar. We had sex the other day, this and that. And I never had sex in my life. So my brother believed them, and now to this day he disowns us for that and never wants to talk to us or does anything. And my brother was a father figure when I was growing up, and for him to disown me really is hurtful. My mom was sick. She had a hole in her heart and she was dying from cancer. Knowing that she was dying from cancer and had only 5 years to live, she was constantly keep doing the drugs. Her friends were shooting her up right in front of our eyes. I was constantly fighting with them, wondering why they were killing my mom faster. Felt the goodbye. I heard her saying, hey, I'm going home. It's my time to go home. I told my aunt that she passed. My aunt called me a liar, smacked me across my face, pulled my hair, told me to shut up and go back to my room. Well, the phone rang, and I heard my aunt saying that they needed to go to the hospital. Her and my brother and my uncle left and went to the hospital. When I seen my brother come back, crying, knowing that my mom passed, I ran right in front of a car, doing 75 miles per hour, got hit. And the paramedics wanted to take me. They were trying to say that I was 5150. My aunt told her no, that my mom just passed away. And they felt sorry because they knew that she just passed, that they weren't going to commit me in a psych ward. As for my teenage years, we had to live with my aunt. It was so hard for us to live with my aunt because we were always constantly fighting, bumping heads. She was always calling us stupid, low lives, piece of crap. Never felt loved. My dad would come and hitchhike. He would have to go back down. We would always ask my dad, why aren't you trying to get custody of us? He was always constantly living with his parents. And he kept on telling us, oh, we can't because he doesn't have a job. Me and my aunt would always constantly fight. She would call me retarded. I'm a piece of crap, a low life. So I felt that, and I just felt like I didn't want to live. So I started cutting myself. I popped pills. I cut my main artery. I had to get a stent in to replace the arteries. I kept on, and finally I heard one day, if I keep cutting or popping pills, I will not survive. I had a Christian woman come to me and ask, why am I cutting? And I told her I wanted to be in heaven with my mom. And she told me that that's not the right way. You won't. You'll go to hell. So she asked me to go to church with her, and I said, okay. It was Baptist Calvary. And I told my aunt says, oh, why do you want to go to church? There's no Jesus, no nothing. So I felt there was nobody to go to. So I started going to church. She kept on telling me that I'm full of crap. Why are you believing in God? My sister moved in with my dad when I was 16 years old. So I stayed there, and I felt, why did she move in? Because my dad finally got custody, and I felt like I didn't have nobody. So I moved in with them, and I had to quit high school. I only had 5 credits left to do to get my own job because he wouldn't support me. He wouldn't buy me my backpack, my clothes, or anything. Then started doing drugs again, and he ended up back in prison. So I got married when I was 18 years old. I worked at Converse and then worked at Walmart. Came home one day finding 2 cops there saying that I couldn't be there because I wasn't on the list. And I was broken, didn't know what to do. I didn't have family. And I asked him, are you coming with me? Him and his mom shook their head and told me no, that he stayed and that the marriage was over. I felt broken. I had to sleep underneath the bridge down in Fontana. I called my family members asking them if I could go. No family members would have took me in. I called my grandma and grandpa, my dad's parents. They told me that they had too many people. I didn't have nowhere. I kept on laying underneath the bridge for a couple days. I kept on asking God, why? And I told him if I don't get an answer that I'm going to take my life. I'm going to run in front of a train or just commit suicide. Heard a voice telling me to walk and walk. So I kept on walking, and he told me to go right to left. And he told me to stop in this church that was called Calvary. I stopped in there at 2:30 in the morning. A pastor told me that he's been waiting for me, and that if he didn't open the doors, that he felt somebody would have took their life. He put me up in a room for a couple days and told me to come back. I came back. I told him I don't have nobody. My family shunned me. They don't want nothing to do with me. So he put me in a home with the Christian people. I felt it was good, but every time that I left with Enrique, he would talk in Spanish, knowing that he thought I didn't speak Spanish, and talking dirty, and I felt that it was wrong, and I needed someone else. I met my husband at a bar with my aunt. My aunt, her husband passed away, so my aunt needed me, so I moved back in with her. And she was constantly saying, oh, you guys are always gonna constantly move back in. I said, well, I don't need to move back in, but you needed the help. So she wanted to go to bar. I didn't like the bar theme. I always drank Pepsi or bottles of water. So I seen this guy walking through the bar, and he was wild. So I thought, hey, he was the man for me. So it was a Friday night. It was June 26, 2005. He asked me to dance, so we danced to I Crossed My Heart. So after I Crossed My Heart was over, the song, he dropped to his knees, asked me to marry him, and I just started laughing. I told him he was a fool, that he was just so totally drunk, and that he doesn't know what he was talking about. So he asked me for my number. I gave him my number. I told him I work out 5 o'clock in the morning, but I'll be up at 4 getting ready, because I was doing my nursing job. So he called me at 4:30, asked me, do I remember everything? And I told him, I remember everything. Do you? So he told me yes, that he does. He asked, do you remember me asking you to marry me? And I said, yes, I do. And I told him, I thought you're funny. He's all, I'm serious. So we started dating, and later down the line, we kept on dating. It was December 16th, 2005, he re-asked me to marry him. And I told him, yes, I would, but later down the line, let's do a couple years, and then we'll get married. As time passed, we've been together for 10 years. We got married July 27th, 2014. We've been married for a couple years. He didn't believe. I didn't pressure him in believing God. I just kept on telling him that one day God will call you near. God has bigger plans for you. So I kept on going to church, trying to find the right church. And finally we found the right church. So one day I told him, I'm going to the Harvest Crusade and I'll be back. If you want to go, let's go. He was sick and he had pneumonia at the time. So he told me that he was going to watch it. I said, that would be great for you to watch it. I came home that night knowing and feeling that God was tugging at me saying, when you get home, something very beautiful and inspiring is going to happen. So I went home and I seen my husband in tears. I asked him, why are you in tears? And I told him, let me guess, you called and gave your life over to Christ. And he said, yes. And he's all, I want to start going to church. I believe. That year, April 26, 2015, we both gave our lives over to Christ. I just found out in December when I got major flu that I have ketoacidosis diabetes, which is worst diabetes there is. I have acid going through my bloodstream where they're trying to get it under control. I'm always constantly getting put down because of my weight, or constantly getting put down the way I am, and it's hurtful. Having a father constantly put you down and constantly ain't there for you, it's really hurtful. Looking for the father figure, knowing that I don't have, but I know I have one father figure, and it's Jesus Christ. I've been believing in Jesus Christ ever since I was little. My grandfather, my dad's father, he was a pastor. And so we had the ministry life through our whole years. I stopped going to church when I was 18, but I started going back when I was 21, knowing that without Jesus Christ, we wouldn't be where we are. We all struggle, we all fall short. I pray all the time. I love Christian music. I'm constantly blasting it through everybody's ears. Even when we're riding on the bike, I'm raising my hand, worshiping. People just smiling, taking pictures. I'm like, keep taking pictures. I know where I'm at. I'm with God. I'm free, having my hair blowy, just being me. Even when I have family members want to eat at my spirit, knowing that they want to try to get me down, I just go in my room and cry, or I'll go in my prayer room, my war room, and just read and like worship and just pray for them. You could do anything that you want when you put your heart to it. If someone tells you that you're unworthy, that you're nothing, that you're low life, or even if you got raped, hurt, or in a broken home, or being in gangs, you could do anything. You can change your life around with God. God is always there 100%. You don't have to look for the love that I've been looking for. I know where I'm at now with Christ. I know that He's my Father. He's my number one healer, my doctor, my Savior. He's been there through thick and thin, and He will be there thick and thin for anyone. He's a father that I never had, knowing that when I need somebody to talk to, He listens. He's there. Philippians 4:13, you could do all things through Christ who strengthens you, and I believe that. I had people saying that you can't do anything, you won't be nowhere, you're just a low life, you will end up like your family or be a dropout. Well, I was a high school dropout. Now I went through college. I'm a 24/7 caretaker. I stopped cutting. I stopped wanting to just end my life. There's something better out there, and I know that God has something better. I know that I will be bigger and brighter and trying to help others. and through life. I love people to life. I always there for anybody who needs it 24/7. What I learned from my bad experiences, that I could do anything through Christ who strengthens me. I could be whatever I want to be. Knowing people that want to put you down, knowing they say that you can't go to college or you can't do nursing school. Well, guess what? I got my medical assistant. I am a caregiver. I could do whatever. I like when people tell me that I won't be nothing, because it pushes me harder knowing that I could be and not listening to what they're saying. Having me pray with them is like a blessing, knowing that I never thought I would help them or pray with them, knowing that they never believed, and all of a sudden I have half of my family members believing in Christ. I'm in a ministry which is called Risen Kings. The ministry is so wonderful. We go out and feed the homeless every Thursday of the night at 6 p.m. We go out and preach the gospel, help get them off the street, help save their lives, help clothing them, feeding them, knowing that they don't have nobody to love on them. We go on rides, we go and minister to anybody that needs it. We go and help bringing them to church, or we try to help them get into a home, or we try to give them what they need. Just being there, loving on them, caring for them, knowing that they have somebody out there that loves them. When I'm down and out, that I could go down on my knees and just pray and worship to my Father, knowing that He is the one for me and that He hears our answers, that if we're broken, He's there. Knowing if nobody cares, He cares. Knowing that if we're alone, we don't have to be alone, that He's there. Our faith is always there with Him. My name is Anna Marie Smith. I aspire to inspire.
My name is Walter Combs, and I currently live in Cathedral City, California. I want to talk a little bit about my childhood, because I believe that is what shaped me to the man that I am today. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, in the early 70s. As I grew older, I realized that drugs has played a very important role in my life. I remember driving on the bus one day, actually to go to a neighborhood clinic, and I would see drug addicts just openly nodding out in the middle of parking lots. And then from that, I would go home and I would see my mother nodding out. So I was able to contrast what was going on in the street and what was going on in my own home. My mother was a heroin addict. I had two brothers that were heroin addicts. I had one sister that was a heroin addict, and my father, as I understood, was an alcoholic. So I knew very on that I had problems in my household that I had to try to overcome. And one of the things I remember early on was I had to develop a plan on how I was going to live a healthy and productive life. My mother, she was a scrapper, and I contrast that between my mother and my sister. You see, when I was 13 years old, my mother passed away, and my father had been dead for quite some time, and I went to go live with my sister. I knew the difference between, having some things, and then when I went to go live with my sister, resources became very, very scarce. My mother, although she was a heroin addict, she was a hustler. We were on welfare. She worked. She sold drugs. I remember one time when the police came to our home and they served a search warrant on our home. And being woken up in the middle of the night and finding out that they had tried to, it was a shootout in my house. And I remember walking out of the door, seeing the bullet holes in the door of my home, just knowing that, all that was in support of me and my brothers and my sister. My sister, on the other hand, she had a different life. It was kind of a fun life in that, she really didn't care about, us going to school. She really didn't care about her own kids and them going to school. But it was fun in the sense that, when the 1st and the 15th showed up, we knew that we could go out and buy what we wanted, and we could, have things that other kids in the neighborhood had. But 4 days later, we were broke and didn't have a lot of food to eat, so we had to scrap. I had seen both sides of what life has to bring. Under my mother's care, we never wanted for anything. Under my sister's care, we needed a great deal. My teenage years, wow, that was me coming into my own. It was a trying time for me. As I mentioned earlier, my mother passed away when I was 13, and I went through a sense where I was feeling sorry for myself. I had transitioned to life with my sister, and although there were other siblings in the home that were older than me, I felt that I was the leader, or that I was the oldest in the home. And I remember hanging out with guys I shouldn't have been hanging out with. I remember just trying to figure out who I was, in the whole scope of that living environment. I went from me and my brother and sister to a situation where it was now 10 of us inside a home, and everybody's trying to scrap for who they are as individuals. One thing that I remember that kind of changed my life is I used to love playing basketball, and I would play basketball every day before I went to high school. And one day I decided I wasn't going to go to high school anymore. I was going to stop going to school. And it felt good to, after the basketball game, just leave and go hang out. As a kid, I knew from the beginning that I wanted something more out of my life. And growing up in Brooklyn, there weren't a lot of examples of that. My mother selling drugs, folks around me selling drugs. But I knew early on that seeing that happen, that wasn't a way out. That wasn't a way to survive. And I was a survivor. I wanted to survive. Trying to find myself in my early teens, trying to figure out what drugs is all about. And it was later on in life that I realized that, the reason why I swore for drugs to this day is because what I saw early on in my life. I knew the contrast between right from wrong, and I attribute that to, living with my mother. Even though she had her own issues, she did teach me right from wrong, and in my heart of all hearts, I knew that wasn't something that I wanted to be involved in. Started going back to school, got new friends, and that's when the competitive side of me came out. I always tried to find my way, and I figured out that my years of playing basketball, my years of trying to compete, that I wanted to show the world or show my friends that I was just as good as they were. I was the only one in my whole house going to school. Everybody else was sleeping, but I got up every day and went to high school. And I know that friends or the people that you hang around with are very, very important to your success. Tried real hard to get my grades up. And I remember being embarrassed because I actually got left back for a semester. And I remember being embarrassed of the fact that, you know, everybody else was in 11th grade and I was in the 10th grade still. But in my hearts of all hearts, I felt that I needed to be with my friends, you know. So when they were, you know, out on the basketball court or when they were out doing something, I was studying and I was making sure, because I had a lot of room to make up, you know. And I eventually did catch up, and I eventually did graduate high school. And what I'm most proud of with that is that I think it was my 11th and 12th grade, I wind up bringing my grades so far up that I wound up being on the honor roll, you know, the 11th and 12th grade, and I was very, very, very proud of that. But I wasn't able to catch up to most of my friends because, you know, what I had done in the 9th and 10th grade. But, you know, I got far enough into high school where I felt that I had accomplished something. My young adult years, those were the fun years. Right after high school, I decided that, you know, all that practice that I had done and all that catching up I had done in high school, I didn't really prepare for college. And early on in my high school years, I knew that I had to leave my sister's home. You know, it just simply wasn't a lot of food to go around. There wasn't a lot of resources to go around, and I just didn't want to be there and be another mouth to feed or be another drain on the family. So I was recruited and I went into the Marine Corps. And Marine Corps is what really, really changed my life. It got me out of Brooklyn, and it gave me an opportunity to see different parts of America and see the world and just know that there's more to just growing up in Brooklyn. For the first couple of years in the Marine Corps, I was a nerd. You know, I stayed mostly in the barracks. I didn't go anywhere. Eventually, I was able to buy my first car, and I actually had to learn how to drive in the military as well. Being young, being in the Marine Corps, I had a great time. Started drinking. I drank a little bit when I was younger, but found alcohol. Alcohol was good for a while. I don't drink to this day because of it. Went overseas to Japan. I met my lovely wife, Philippa, and we started building a life together. I decided after 8.5 years that I met my wife, and I didn't, the honest truth, I didn't want to, you know, go overseas, or I didn't want to have her follow me. So I decided I was going to get out of the Marine Corps. And what I found interesting at the point is I was in the Marine Corps for 8.5 years, and she got a job working for, I think it was the county courts at that time, and she was making more money than me. I'm thinking, I've been in the Marine Corps for 8.5 years. She gets a job, and you know, she's making more than me. And it wasn't a male chauvinist thing. It was, you know, I need to do something else. I need to, you know, the Marine Corps is not taking care of me like they should be, or I shouldn't be doing something else. So I remember deciding I was going to get out. It was 1990, or actually it was probably 1989. I decided I was going to get out of the Marine Corps. It took me about a year, but I went from all the agencies in Southern California that I could find, and I went out and tested. And one time I went out to San Bernardino, a city here in California, and I tested for a meter reader job. I believe it was a meter reader job. And after the interview, one of the gentlemen on the panel called to the Marine Corps and wanted to find out who I was. And he told my master sergeant at the time that I need to be going for something higher. I needed to be doing something other than being a meter reader. Not that a meter reader is a bad job, but they saw something in me that I didn't see at the time. And I started testing for law enforcement, and eventually I got 3 job offers, and I decided to go work for the city of Indio. And I worked for the city of Indio for 4.5 years, and then I transferred over to Palm Springs, where I am today. When I look back, and I don't drink, I don't do drugs, but when I look back, I understand, or I believe that it was because of my mother's addiction that she actually saved me from those demons, because I saw it in her, and I knew that I didn't want to be that way. I saw it in my brothers, and I knew that I didn't want to be that way. And I knew what it was like. I saw it. You know, a lot of times, I believe people get addicted to drugs or alcohol because they don't know any better. And I saw that, and I knew better. I remember when I decided years ago when I didn't want to drink alcohol anymore, and I think I've probably been clean and sober close to 25 years now or more. I really don't keep track, but I just decided one day, I knew the pitfalls of alcohol, and I decided one day that I just didn't want to be controlled by a substance, and I just decided that I didn't want to drink anymore. And I really attributed that to what I saw growing up. As a young child, as a young adult, I always had a plan. I didn't always agree with, or I didn't always stick to the plan, but I always had a plan. I knew where I wanted to end up. And I know that, things get in the way, and obstacles come in your life, and sometimes you may have to defer, or you may have to deter, but I think having a plan is what allowed me to continue on. As a black man, I never look at myself as a statistic. I know that, with opportunity comes results. And if given an opportunity, you can succeed in anything that you want to do, as long as you put forth the effort. So anytime I'm faced with any challenges or obstacles, I know that if I give it 100%, I'll be successful. And so I don't look at, the odds are against me. Being a police officer, the odds were stacked against me based on the neighborhood that I grew up in, based on some of the things that I had done early on in my when I was younger. But I didn't let those deter me. When I tested for sergeant, I was the first African American in my generation here to test for it. I didn't have any reservations about doing it. When I became a lieutenant, I didn't have any reservations for doing it. And when I became a captain, I knew that it would inspire others, and so that propelled me or made me want to do it even more. For those that think that they can't make it, or for those that think they have to be different. I say, be different. You are different. Don't let anybody tell you that you're not. You have to compete with yourself, and you have to compete with the world. And as long as you have goals, plans, aspirations, you can be successful. I had self-reflection. I wanted to know, why is it that out of everybody in the police department or anybody that's come before me, why was I chosen? And I looked at three things. I looked at qualifications. I knew I was qualified. I looked at opportunity. And without opportunity, then the position wouldn't even be there. And the last thing I looked at is being blessed. Being in a position to all that you've done all your life to get you to the point that you can achieve some type of success is the greatest gratification that you can achieve. Don't let anybody tell you you can't be who you want to be, that you can't do whatever you want to do. You just want to put yourself in a position so when the doors open up, you're ready to go. My name is Walter Combs, and I aspire to inspire.
My name is Rosalind Tellez-Griffin. I am 59 years old, and I grew up in Los Angeles County and also the Inland Empire. As a young child growing up, it was a really good time because I had a lot of first cousins to grow up with and lots of aunts and uncles, and we spent a lot of good family time together. I would probably say the most traumatic time in my young years was standing outside in the middle of the night holding my mom's leg and watching the feds really rip our house up, throw our furniture out, and consequently watching my dad be driven away in the back of a police car. I didn't understand it then, and it took me many, many years to really figure out what actually happened. But that was probably when I was around 3 years old, and that picture never really left me, and I will probably always remember that. He went to prison, and so I often visit him with my mom, but I didn't see him really outside of prison facilities until I was about 11 years old. When he got out, things didn't work out between him and my mother, and they divorced. And before they divorced, my sister was born. I had the best support with my grandmother and again my aunts and uncles. So pretty much outside of not really having a dad there, my childhood was really, really good. My dad's grandparents were very instrumental in raising me, so I really enjoyed my childhood. I can't really say that I was not loved. I had a Christian background. God was definitely a part of my life. Bible studying was a part of my life. And I think it was so much so that you don't really know again where to put your faith at. You just kind of follow what your parents are doing. But I know that later on in life, my faith in God was very significant in the outcome in so many different areas. I really wanted to be a teacher. I think that was my first inkling of what I wanted to do as my career. And I decided after high school that I was going to go to college. But I didn't finish college, and I ended up meeting the love of my life and getting married. But of course, I got pregnant first, and I was ecstatic about it, and so was he. And through that union, we had 3 children. As a young adult, I knew that I wanted to be a mother. And when I first had my daughter, I knew that there was still something that wasn't right in the back of my mind, and I couldn't put my finger on it, but I realized that I had this insatiable hold to never leave my child with anybody, including my husband. When I had my daughter, my grandparents really wanted my dad to be around to welcome this new baby into the family. And because he was my mother's first love, I think she saw him and he felt that he had changed. She felt that he had changed, and they decided to get back together. And that's when this dark cloud really came over me, and I knew what it was that didn't feel right. And what I remember was my dad molesting me when he got out of prison. I realized a lot of things happened as a result of that time period. I remember that my hair used to fall out in patches, and I really didn't know why, and my mom didn't know why. Just patches, just bald spots. And I realized that that was related to that. The molestation probably lasted about a year, and when my mother divorced him, she removed me from the culprit and from the abuser and from the person that was hurting me. And so I did what most people do. They protect themselves, and sometimes when something tragic happens, they bury it. I found a place so deep inside that it never surfaced until he came around. And I remember that I had a sister at home, and I was determined and hell-bent that the same thing that happened to me wasn't going to happen to my sister. I made a call to my mom, and I asked her to bring my dad over, and I was going to confront him. Here I was, married. It was years later, and I was going to confront him. He came over, and like any other abuser, he denied that it ever happened. He just denied that he always loved me, and any touching or caressing was just a father showing his daughter love. And I was like, nah, man, some of the things you did was just not right. And he left the house, and my mom called me, and she came back, and she asked me, what did I talk to my dad about? And I told her, I said, I confronted him about molesting me. And she said, I figured that was it. I never asked my mom if she knew. We never discussed it. But she said those words to me that left it unresolved for me as to whether or not she knew. You think your father is the one that is supposed to lead you, to guide you into finding your soulmate, to give you all the tools you need to find the right man. And here it was that my dad had did something so vile to me that it just really significantly changed me. After then, I became really dedicated in letting people know that It doesn't have to be the stranger. It doesn't have to be the person that, is down the street. It could be your closest friend. It could be the ones that you love to touch you inappropriately and that it wasn't right. One of the worst things was that I never left my daughter with my husband. And even though, I knew this man, and I knew that, well, he's not going to do this because he loves me and he loves my daughter. But, I kind of feel my mom, she must have felt the same way, and I couldn't trust that. I couldn't trust the love that he had for me, and I couldn't trust the love that he had for my daughter. But one good thing about it was that my husband understood. So he didn't, he didn't make me feel bad for the choice that I made to not leave her. He understood it, and he supported me, and he continued to support me in the feelings that I have. And you know what? That's really what it's all about, is having your significant others support you where you need it. So I give him a lot of credit for that. Going on and having 2 more children and almost feeling like a single parent, because my husband was a truck driver. And so there were a lot of nights at home by myself because he went cross country. And, when you're by yourself, you find things to comfort you in ways that aren't so good. So, I didn't go outside of my marriage and find other men, but I found things to comfort me. And consequently, those were drugs and food. Marijuana was my drug of choice. And if you've ever been a marijuana user, after having a few hits, you want to eat, right? So I did the 2 with a vengeance and ballooned up to weight that was just unhealthy for my body. I was never really able to talk about it because I think a lot of these things had a lot to do with being molested. And that once I confronted it, then it began to haunt me. And in the back of my mind, I started to feel like I needed to make myself feel good. That probably was not a really good time for me, my adult years, because I remember really looking one day while my children were asleep and looking up in the cabinets just to find some weed. I mean, frantically looking all over. A really good friend of mine decided that she had lost a lot of weight by doing a drug that's called speed, and it revved you up and it killed your appetite. And I was going to try it because I had gained all this weight. So I would say after the weed and compiled with the food, then speed was my drug of choice. I was on my way to work one day and I was at a stoplight, and I had something like a deuce and a quarter. All I remember is, you got to the corner and you went around the corner, and the first half of the car comes around first and the other half comes around a half hour later, because it was one of them big cars that could sit 20 people. And the armrest was really wide. And I remember at a stoplight, and I pulled out all of my paraphernalia. I pulled out my mirror. I pulled out my little special little chopping tool. And I was at the stoplight on my way to work with some children. And there I was doing a line. And I remember looking in the mirror, and I'm cleaning off my nose and everything. And I said to myself, what are you doing? I went to work, and once a habit, it's a habit. And I was in that bathroom at lunchtime doing it again. And I kept saying, this ain't right. This isn't right. I'm going to lose my job. But I realized that I was hooked, and it was bigger than me. One day I went to my girlfriend's house, and of course she was the one that introduced me to it. And I was over to her house really late one night, and I tell you, I did this particular batch, and we was having fun and laughing, and then all of a sudden I felt like my life was ending. I felt like I was having a heart attack. I thought, Lord, if I ever need you, I need you now, because here I am across town, and I felt my life was slipping away, and all I thought about was my kids. And so I prayed to God, if you please just take this away and let me get home to my babies. This is not where I want to die, out here in this cow town. God heard me, and he saved me that day. I know he did. I felt him. I felt his spirit, and he gave me a second chance. And you know what's so really powerful is that even though I said that God was introduced into my life, you know, I never really called on him. I always said my prayers because they were mechanical. You know, your parents said, okay, say your prayers before you go to bed. I said my prayers before I go to bed, but I never asked for anything for myself. I said the mechanical, and sometimes, you know, trying to hurry up and get in bed, I just said Jesus wept. You know, it's like, Jesus wept. What did he wept for? You know, it was like, I don't know. It was just what you said. But that day, I prayed. I prayed like I've never prayed before. I talked to him, and I asked him for things, and I felt that he heard me, because I went home to my babies that night. And it was that night that God kept me alive to make a choice. And the choice was either to keep doing what you're doing or change it up. I remember going into the house, looking at my babies, and was just so grateful that I could kiss them and hug them and hold them. And I remember waking up my daughter just because I wanted her to look at me and just to see me and to know that I was there. And I decided then that I had a purpose and that God was going to be in my life, and I was going to rely on him for the rest of my life. As a young adult, I had a lot more ahead of me, and although I didn't know what those were going to be, I just know that wherever I was walking, wherever path that I was taking, that God needed to go with me. He needed to go with me. My husband, I used to call him a Louisiana swamp dog because that's where he was from, and he loved Louisiana. I knew some of his people here in Riverside, and I saw his picture, and I looked and I saw the picture, and I was like, wow, who is that? My aunt said, who wasn't my aunt at the time, said, that's my nephew, and he's from New Orleans, and that's where he's at. He came down about 6 years later and never left. He never left. He went back about 3 times to visit, and out of that union, we had 3 kids. Most Black men don't go to the doctor, and even when they sense something is wrong, they tend to, you know, just bypass it. He didn't go to the doctor, and when he did, he found out that he had cancer, and he had prostate cancer. 3 years he fought the good fight. He fought the good fight, and he even did experimental avenues to try to cure the cancer. I'll never forget going to the hospital one day and him looking at me and saying, Roz, I don't want to die. And just hearing those words will haunt me forever. It was very, very hard for us as a family, knowing that this was imminent, knowing that there was nothing we could do to stop this. His battle was lost. I went to a restaurant that was not too far from my job, and I got food poisoning. So I went to the doctor, and they gave me medicines and what have you, and I stayed home that weekend. And then that Monday I went to work, and I still was not feeling right. I remember laying at the end of my bed, and I kind of had my head like this, my hand over my head, and I had this hand here kind of like just on top of my breast. Well, this particular time, I felt a lump, and that lump was significant to me because I had never felt it before. I took breast exam and from my primary doctor, and from then it went on to a biopsy. Then it went to that final curtain call where you're in the doctor's office and he gives you the result. I kind of felt that everything that I had went through up until that appointment, that the outcome was not going to be what I wanted to hear. Waiting for that doctor to come in was like the worst, probably 30 minutes that I've ever spent in my life. I was told that I had breast cancer. I always thought, well, I'm healthy. I'm never going to be touched by cancer. I have to now tell my kids that I have cancer. The only thing that I could do, and that was get on my knees and go to God and ask Him to please be my strength and be my rock. There were no other options for me. I didn't ask, maybe can you keep me here, or can you think about it, or if it be your will. I asked Him directly, I need you to let me be here for my children. I continued to pray, and I remember when the doctor told me that I needed to have a lumpectomy and I needed to have this lump out. And my family came, my brother, my sister, everybody came around my hospital bed that morning. And I looked at the doctor and I said, how are you today? And he said, I'm fine. And I told him, I said, I prayed for you last night. I prayed for you. And he said, really? He said, well, let's pray now. And I knew that this was the man. This was the doctor that God sent for me. The outcome was good. And as I move into 5 years of chemotherapy, to have my crown of glory being taken away through chemo was life-changing. During that time, my husband did pass away, and I kind of felt that he suffered a lot. So I was at peace with him going. I went to work because I had to provide income for our household. God put so many things, good things in place for me that I know that my survival was due to Him. I knew that His Spirit was guiding me in all aspects of this journey. Right now, I would say that things are so much better. And again, I have to give all of that to the Most High Heavenly Father. A cousin of mine encouraged me to do one of my first loves, and that was be involved with small children. And she was a teacher, and she called me and said, hey, I need a teacher's aide. So I jumped at the chance to be able to work with her. And then I found it. You know, a light bulb went off, and she was like, go to school, Roz, and you know, start off and become a certified teacher's aide, and then, you know, become a teacher. And so I did just that. As your family grows and your needs become more demanding, you need more. So I decided to search for another job that would actually pay for my medical insurance. So I prayed about this job, and they say third time is a charm. And first 2 times I didn't get it, and I just kept praying about it. And then the third time, God made a way, because the people came looking for me. When I think of things or something that I would say to inspire a person who may have went through similar things that I have, I would say first to them is maintain your faith. When you put your faith in imperfection, the results are going to be imperfect. But when you put yourself in line with having faith, and it is your faith and your truth, then you can overcome anything. You have a choice to make, and that choice is to live your life or let your life live you. I chose to live my life. Life is hard. It's hard for everybody. It's hard for you, me. It's hard for everybody. But you have to have a reason to get up out of bed every single day. You have to have a reason. You may have just one small significant change, but I'll tell you, if you make yourself a plan and you make yourself a goal and achieve that goal, you'll feel much better about yourself. It took me a long time to realize that it was okay to love myself and to appreciate me, to look in the mirror every day with a bald head, with glasses that I need to see because I can't see without them. All these little, things that you think, wow, if I was younger, you know what? You're not going to get any younger. Embrace your age, because guess what? God gave them to you. You know, if you're 15, if you're 20, if you're 60, God has blessed you with each one of those years. So I would say be an advocate for yourself. Enjoy your life. Find your truth for yourself. Find out what makes you happy and go for it. Don't let anything stop you from wanting and desiring to make yourself be whole. My name is Rosalind Tellez-Griffin, and I aspire to inspire.
I am Stanley Butler, and I now reside in Redlands, California. I think my childhood was very interesting. I was born in New York City, proudly in Harlem Hospital. And before I was born, my parents moved from what we would call in New York as Uptown, and moved into this projects down in mid-Manhattan. Was where I was raised. I have a sister, and then I also have a half-sister that I didn't grow up with. And I don't think I met her, I was like 12 years old or something like that when I met her. And The origins of my parents, my father is from the Bahamas. So he was born, like my sister would like to say, on a boat to nowhere. So I believe his father was trying to get him to be born in the United States, but he was born on a boat, and they labeled it at Key West, Florida. And my mother is from the South, South Carolina, and so I like to consider myself as a first generational American because my father really truly was born in the water. So I was the one that was born in the States, and I feel proud to be a Butler. Being in Nassau, Butlers were, huge, big family and everything down there. So I brought a lot of the culture with me that my father taught me. The childhood was very interesting, just because I was always, I guess, considered different. And at times it was very challenging because being dark-skinned, knowing about the 60s and prior, as we were establishing ourselves as Black people, sometimes that became, it was, you're dark, you're the back of the line, and you're light, you're bright, all of that type of thing. So I did go through that. And it was interesting from my father's side of the family, it really wasn't that type of a big deal. On my mother's side of the family, being from the South, I tended to pick up little insecurities, it was like, you're so dark, and all this kind of stuff used to go on. So that led to a lot of challenges which eventually I'd have to battle through later in life. And thinking back about my parents, I have to start with my father. He was actually a dancer. He's no longer with us. My father danced professionally. He danced in the 1930s. He was a Lindy Hop dancer running through Harlem. And he was a churchgoer, but he was what we would consider right now a wild man. He ran around, and being young, I didn't realize the pain that he put my mother through. He was chasing skirts and things, and I remember he would take me to places and sit me down and then disappear for a while and come back. But a great heart, very talented man. I remember him calling me one day in his bedroom and made me sit down and watch this movie with the Marx Brothers called A Day After Races. It's a big thing that I remember about him. And there's this famous dance scene in that movie. And he was in the dance scene. He had me running like behind him. I had to dance. I was in the Elks Club. I used to be, dancing parades with him. He was a captain in the marching band and everything like that. So I had to do it. I was little Stanley. So the pressure was kind of rough. And yes, he was a very strict guy. I mean, he tore into me like every other day. I lived in fear of when is the beating coming, because my sister would start up some stuff and my mother would protect. She would not let one kid just get beat down. So, two had to go. And I would be so mad because I would get beat down for stuff I didn't do. And he'd come in with a strap, and it could be hard. He was just running the streets a lot, but he was home every day. I remember he worked in a foam factory. He came home and paid the bills and would just go out and party. Now, my mother she was more of a domestic. My mother's just like big-hearted person. She basically just cleaned homes, and I grew up with plastic on the chairs, You could not dirty her house. You just couldn't do that. It's like when you put a spoon in the sink, it was washed before it hit the bottom of the sink. You know, she's just, and, you know, she could complain, just complain all day, but loved her kids and held that family together. At 14, the most shocking thing was my father suddenly passed, like he just had a stroke. He went out to one of his events, and I remember shining his shoes and saying, "I'll see you later." And he never came back. He was dancing when it hit him. So, you know, me and my sister went up to the hospital, and in that time, I got to see him, you know, with the oxygen, and just a few hours later, he was gone. It seems like I went wild, very painfully. Because coming up, you know, he was a very strict man, and my mother was very soft, as you put it. So, of course, there was no more beatings, you know, so I kind of like ran the streets rampant, and that's when the pain of drugs came in. I was addicted to heroin at 15 years old, and I mean, just everything under the sun. And, you know, I ran around with a bunch of friends, and we just, like, our lives were ruined. You know, I still thought I was going to be a professional baseball player at that time. I got thrown out of high school. I got kicked out of all public buildings in New York City at the age of 14 years old. I was not allowed in any public school building. I was so bad and full of anger and violence that I remember hitting a teacher, and then that was, led to so many things. I was able to eventually graduate from high school with a tutor that would have to come to my house, and it took about 3 years because I was considered a danger to society. It was really a rough, traumaful time there. As I could look at it now, God was definitely keeping me alive. I never had to do any, quote, real prison time, but, you know, I thought I was ready because everyone else did. It was like the mentality of thinking that that's what would make you a man. I spent 10 years mugging people and just hurting people, hanging around with pimps and doing all kind of things. And it was just my teen years, I'd have to say, it was just painful. I could remember just that sense of feeling free. And if anything, I would not want that to wish that on anyone. But when my father died, I couldn't relate to feeling. I didn't know how to truly feel because I went from this person that felt like he was in prison and lived in fear of beatings to no one's going to beat me anymore. You know, so I'm going to do what I want. It brought pain to my mother. I could remember her looking out the window and calling me to come upstairs, and I'm like, no, don't worry, I got it, and then disappear for 2 or 3 days. I was very angry, very angry. But the saving grace through all of that was I started playing bass guitar through a association with someone who I used to score drugs for. I'd hang out with him all the time, and we'd get high together, and I told him one time, you know what, teach me how to play, and he would laugh it off. And this went on for some months or so, but one weekend, he invited me up to a place in New Jersey called the Pocono Mountains. And I think he wanted to just get high. He still didn't think I wanted to play. But I went up there with him, and then that night I said, come on, man, show me how to play. Show me how to play. So, you want to learn how to play? And I said, you know what? You teach me the neck, all the notes on the scale, and for every mistake I make, you can hit me with a stick. And he liked that because I used to kind of rough him up. So he went for that one. And then I remember that night, I learned every note on the bass guitar. I couldn't play it, but I knew, like you said, where was F? I could tell you where F was. And I guess that put it all in perspective of wrapped up where all of that pain in my teen years, that was the surrounding thing. And again, you never know what God is doing in your life at that particular time that you're in. You just never know. I had quit heroin by the time I was 20, so I went from like 15 to 20. But then I started drinking. I was a young drunk, you know. I drank, played basketball, and I really got into strength, like lifting weights and fighting and stuff like that. I was a shy guy when I was young, and my sister used to beat me up all the time. So one of the proudest days of my life was when I was able to beat her up. It really felt good to get that off my back, you know. And I was like, you know. And then there was a few other guys in the neighborhood that I had to take care of, one by one. and I did that. I took care of them one by one. I always wanted a brother, so I would spend different periods of times with younger kids. And, you know, I was pretty well known in my neighborhood, especially being, you know, athletic and this tough guy. So, you know, they would follow me around and, you know, I'd teach them baseball. But I would take a couple under my wing and mentor them and tell them what and what not to do. And, you know, and still to this day, we're, you know, just amazingly close. You know, so I just like had young brothers, and it fulfilled something that I always felt was missing in my life. I became this drug dealer because I had jobs, but I don't like getting up. You know, it's just something I don't think I was meant to really do that. I couldn't sit in a classroom looking back when I was young, because I would talk all the time and make up these games, and I'd have these excellent report cards, math, excellent, social studies, excellent, everything excellent, behavior unsatisfactory. And that's when me and my father would really go at it, because it was always the unsatisfactory. So I realized I'm just not cut out to sit in a room for 8 hours. And I bore fast, so I don't think I looked at drugs as like the easy way. It was just, you know, I was good at it. And I basically sold drugs for years. I really played music all the time, but I made my money hustling. Acid, I sold LSD in Central Park. Then cocaine, oh boy, tons of cocaine. And marijuana, you know, hustled that and just found my way around things. But somewhere along the line, I got this real good gig with Latin jazz great Dave Valentine. So I was his bass player. I was actually his first bass player. I remember the first gig I did with Dave was in Carnegie Hall. We opened up for Maynard Ferguson, and it was just this whole big thing. And I used to sneak in Carnegie Hall all the time. So just being up on that stage and then watching all my friends sit there, and they snuck in the weed and their beer too and everything. So it was an old good time. Then I toured with Dave for about a year. I think I started settling down maybe 29 and 30. I started really forming bands and putting bands together and working in studios and just trying to find a sound. You know, I was doing gigs here and there and just trying to find, you know, what this is, because I had to settle down because I was just getting along on pure talent or whatever. I played Carnegie Hall. I couldn't read a note of music. And I'm here rehearsing with Dave Grushin and all of these type of top-notch New York City musicians. And I had to sit there and learn everything, you know, just You know, I could not miss one note because it would mess up the whole everything else. And Dave told me, Dave Valentine told me once, he said, "You actually know my music better than I do." But, you know, because they would just read it, you know. And eventually that cost me my job because I couldn't read. When they were ready to really go overseas, I said, "Stanley, you know, we can't do this because, you know, we're going to be just reading stuff and we don't have the time, you know, for you to learn." So that was actually heartbreaking, big time, you know, what I call a big setback. I formed a band, I remember, called Message. And the thing behind that, it was myself, one Puerto Rican guy, and one white guy, you know, who were my best friends, basically. And we had an original band, and the message was always to bring people together. I really ran into a cocaine problem in the early 80s. You know, I had kilos of cocaine, literally. And I smoked so much of that. And that I'm here today is another amazing story. And again, I'll always point to God because there's no way I should be here. I just wanted to be accepted. So that caused a lot of mistakes because I definitely did not grow up or want to grow up shooting heroin or doing drugs and stuff like that. It was, I remember following. I remember being accepted. I had tons of money, party, didn't have to wait online for no club. You know, you show up and, "Oh, Stanley's here," "Oh, come on right in," and just, you know, did all of that kind of crazy stuff. Come around 1986, I went through this bad relationship and stuff, and it was time to escape from New York. Me and Rick were roommates, and, you know, we were supporting each other by our drug dealing. We were still selling little stuff here and there. And but then he just got fed up, and he left New York to come to California. He would say, "I'm getting you out of New York. You gotta come here. You gotta come here." And I was having a bad time, just feeling woe is me, you know, about the relationship and all of that. But he got me out to California, and the greatest thing that's happened in my life. Through him, I met my wife. So we just decided, I guess, that we like each other, and then we fell in love with each other. And we had a child on the way that year. We got married in City Hall. There, we had no family because she's from the South Dakota area, and I'm from New York. We had a lot of love, you know, from telephones and stuff like that. We was out here, you know, on our own. I tell her, you know, I have to play. I want to play music. And she tolerated it to a point, but I owe her everything because she worked. She created her own businesses. What I feel so good about now is that I'm able to basically support my wife now. You know, like, I've been blessed that I can play. I play for a living. I got saved in 1994 when my stepfather passed. I ended up in a church because I was envious of what I thought was coming to me. And, you know, like tours and stuff. Why are all these musicians getting these things? And I'm not doing this or I'm not doing that. And it just somehow, a good friend, he just picked me up because we would walk and talk, and led me into a church. And the first day I heard the pastor speaking, and I went up and got saved. And that is the most influential thing that's ever happened in my life, because you get to see the little steps that you take. Road rage, swearing. I mean, I couldn't stand on a line in Stater Brothers or any supermarket, and I would see someone taking time, you know, however they have to make their payment plan, and I'm sitting back there. I was this person with her, not realizing that was me, that could be me. And I literally saw God bless me with patience. I have made many, many, many mistakes. And there's probably some more coming, but hopefully a lot less, and definitely not with the intensity. What I think I've learned mostly from mistakes is the ability to listen. Because I don't like to repeat them. I have always been a very sensitive, caring person. And I've learned that I've hurt people through mistakes. I really don't like hurting people. I think a lot of the mistakes that I've made was probably being insecure and coming to judgment a little too soon. You come to judgment, then you just react. And a lot of times you're going to react without considering someone else's feelings. I've learned so much about that now. And it's, again, with this help of the Lord has helped me see. God has always been there. He's always there in us all. It's just that when we are able to recognize, and mistakes helps me recognize what God does or does not want me to do. And so it propels me to be better. When I look back and not thinking that I could have hurt someone else, not just what happens to me. I could have caused trauma, we're speeding through and just cutting people off or whatever, just certain things, and not having any type of consideration for what's going on around me. My whole thing is about love and kindness. And again, mistakes are going to be made, but not anything just forcibly. Try not to repeat them. Because usually in most cases I saw, they were just basically offensive, and they come from a place that is not really the makeup of yourself. If I was to look back and speak to myself, that youth that was running around, one of the first things I would say is God loves you and that you're loved, because myself and I believe many of us walk around a lot of times within our own minds. And, rejection is out there. Like, for one, I didn't handle rejection well. I was afraid of rejection. And that carried on so far into my adulthood. It's just something that you hold on. And I would tell myself, it really doesn't matter, because God has everything ordained for you anyway. Your life is chosen and your life is beautiful as you live. The biggest inspiration I really could think about is just God. And don't shortchange God. It's like when we read something in the Bible, whatever we read and what Jesus said to do, I think the best inspiration is to try to do what he did. Don't try to rewrite your own version of it, because it seems like, I know for a fact we just can't go wrong with following him, and that is the goal. That is what we are actually put here to do. Through that, I found myself to be more free than I've ever been. Through all the drugs and all the partying I did, when I found the Lord, I am free. And so that's kind of like what I would have to go back and grab little Stanley and just open up his eyes to see Jesus Christ. I am Stanley Butler, and I aspire to inspire.
My name is Katrina Wilson, and I am currently living in the city of India. I was one of 6. It was really funny because I grew up in a Christian home. My dad's a minister, my mom was the lead singer in the worship team, and I had a different kind of childhood. A lot of the kids who would go out and, have fun more often, going to, movies and this and that, we enjoyed going to church. We went to church and it was school, church, and family. We enjoyed spending time together, watching movies together, going to the beach on our vacations and things like that. My parents were pretty strict on me about not dating, so I was not allowed to date. I had a dream for my life. I already knew what I wanted to do in my life. I knew that I had a call on my life at a very young age, especially since I grew up in church. And so I knew that God had a plan for me. So with everything that I did, being involved in Christian club, staying close to certain friends that would influence me in the right direction instead of the wrong direction, I decided that I was going to be obedient to my parents. I wasn't going to date. I didn't want to drink. I didn't want to party, all those things, because I had my life planned in my mind of what I wanted to become. I knew I wanted to be a minister and be in some kind of ministry and be in some kind of field where I'm helping people. Well, as I became a senior, I was allowed to have my first real boyfriend. At the time, he was this amazing, wonderful athlete. He was a football player, he was a basketball player, he was everything I ever wanted except for a Christian. But I figured I could fix that. He loved me, I loved him, he would change for me. I knew he would change for me. So our first date was at his house. It was a big old family barbecue. My dad came and we all went to his house, and it was a wonderful family event. It was wonderful. The second date, he had to come to church. So I was going to get him saved. So he came, and because he loved me, he received Jesus. But not because he had a relationship with God on his own. And that's where I started to go wrong. I graduated, and I had already had my life pre-planned. I had this great boyfriend who was very handsome. He was, this amazing football player. Me and him had already talked about our dreams and our goals, and he was going to go to college, and I'm a year older than him, so he was going to go to college and he was going to be a football player, and I was going to go to massage school, and I wanted to be a massage therapist. And so I had already planned in my mind, I'm going to stay at home, I'm going to live with my parents and go to college and then get a job from there. Well, a turn in my life was when I graduated. That was the same time my parents decided to announce they're getting a divorce. My whole life kind of crashed before my eyes. Where was I going to go? My parents are getting divorced. They had to split the house. They had to split everything. And I no longer had a place to live. I no longer had stability. And so my boyfriend offered to allow me to live there, and I moved in with him. All my Christian goals and everything that I had planned, to be married before I ever had sex, be married before I did any of those things, I ended up living in sin. I ended up having a baby, our first baby out of wedlock. And the shame I felt and the embarrassment I felt was very real, because my dad is a preacher. I'm a preacher's kid. How am I supposed to step into church pregnant while my dad's the one on the pulpit and I'm not married? It's an embarrassing feeling. So I decided to run away. I'm not going to church. I'm not going to embarrass myself. I'm not going to embarrass my dad and everybody else. So I decided, instead of facing what I had done, I'm going to try and cover it up. So me and him have to get married because I have to fix this. I have to, get back right before God. I started to see him change. I started to see him change, and he became more abusive. He became more careless towards our relationship. He became verbally, mentally, emotionally, and physically abusive to me. And I was so devastated at the fact that my parents had gotten divorced, and I now know what it's like not to have stability in my life. I didn't want that for our little girl. I was determined to make this work. I was determined to make my relationship work. So if we got out of his parents' house and we got our own place, then things will get better for us. If I'm more dedicated to my relationship, things will get better for us. We moved out of his parents' place and got our own apartment. And I stopped working because I had our baby, and I was determined to make this relationship work, make this family work. And I was a stay-at-home mom, and I took care of the house. I took care of him the best that I could. I took care of our daughter. And I had gotten pregnant again with our second daughter at that time. The Lord was drawing me back to him, but I kept pushing God away because every time I would get close to the Lord, my relationship would get rocky. The closer I would get to the Lord, the more hell broke loose in my life and in my home. And so I decided, well, God, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to put you to the side, because if I wanna make this work, then I'm going to have to put him first. I'm gonna have to put myself last and put my family first, because I did not want them to go through what I've been through, and I wanted them to have a stable home. Things got worse. He started doing more marijuana. He started drinking and going out with his friends all night. He would leave me and the babies at home. He wouldn't pay the bills. He wasn't responsible. And I didn't know where I was gonna go. I didn't know what I was gonna do. I didn't have a job. I was a stay-at-home mom, and where was I gonna go? And at that time, I realized I had to give my life back to God. And when I said, finally, yes, God, I surrender. I can't do this on my own. He came in and he began to mold me. He blessed me with a job. He blessed me with a job that made enough money to where I could get a place on my own without their dad. Not that it was an easy road, because it was a very hard road, because after so many years of being in a relationship where you're being brought down and put down and abused, you start looking at yourself as nothing. You start looking at yourself as less than, and you're broken from the inside out. As God began to restore me, he got me out of that broken relationship, and I had to start over with nothing really. I had to move in with my dad because the Lord told me enough is enough. You're moving out now. And I didn't know where I was going to go, but I knew I had to answer that call. So I moved out. I moved in with my dad. I had my two little girls. My dad had finally got himself his own little place, a little apartment. And so when I moved in with them, the Lord spoke to me about becoming a respiratory therapist. I was already a massage therapist, but he spoke to me about going back to school. I was still so hurt on the inside about my past relationship that every day, the only thing that helped me get through that was the Word of God. I would get up, I would read the Word of God, and I had to start believing the Word, because I was so broken that it was the only thing that healed me every day. I had to believe that I can do all things through Christ. I had to begin to believe that I was more than a conqueror through Christ Jesus. Because if I stayed in that relationship, my girls would have grown up thinking that's the way a man's supposed to treat a woman. That's the way life is supposed to be. And I had to become accountable for not just myself, but my children. And did I want to stay in that relationship and then grow up and become abused by a man, thinking that's what it's supposed to be like, that's what love is? I couldn't. God made me responsible for two little children, not just myself. And then I had to answer that call and say, yes, Lord, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it your way. I went back to school. It was hard. My sister, she helped me. She would babysit for me. I would work. I would go to school. I would intern. I had to go through all of those things and still come home and be a mommy. But God's grace was truly sufficient because he had a plan for my life. So I graduated. I took the boards. I passed them. I recently I passed them to become a certified respiratory therapist. And then the struggle came. I passed my test, my written test, to become a registered respiratory therapist, but when I went to pass the clinical simulation, I didn't pass it right away. The enemy tried to attack me and try to attack my mental state. He tried to make me think I wasn't smart enough. I couldn't pass it. It was so hard. I tried it again and still didn't pass it the second time either. By 3 points. It was not something that was easy, but God had put it on the inside of me that this is something he had for me. And so I had to bring him back to his word. God, you who begun a good work in me, you are responsible to fulfill it in me, and I will answer the call. But Lord, it's not going to be me. It's not going to be by might or by power, but by your spirit. And when I surrendered to God, I got in there, I studied as hard as I could. I had people praying for me and I was praying for myself, and I started to believe what God said about me, that I truly can do all things through him. My children are watching me, not just in failure, but in success. And as I began to take off those things that were holding me down, those thoughts of myself that were holding me down, started putting on God's thoughts for me, started believing what he said, I was able to go in there and I just passed my clinical simulation, and I am now a registered respiratory therapist. I have learned from my adversities that no matter what we go through on this journey, because life is a journey, God never failed me. He never left. He always had planned on using everything that I went through to turn it around for my good. I learned that I am stronger than I thought I was, that I don't have to put up with someone treating me however they feel like they want to treat me, that I matter, that God loves me, and that I am enough. And whatever I went through, it was to turn out for my good. I want to say to someone who is a single mom or someone who's going through what I went through, an abusive relationship, abandonment, heartbreak, hurt, I want you to know that God is going to turn everything around for you if you would submit to him. That he is powerful and he is a loving God, and he could take all the broken pieces and he could make a beautiful masterpiece out of your life if you would just let him. My name is Katrina Wilson, and I aspire to inspire.
You see a smile on her face, always the life of the place. Got the right words to lift up someone, giving all she has, helping everyone. But when baby girl goes home, when girlfriend is all alone, she sits in a dark corner, praying for the Lord to hold her. There may be a smile on my face, smile all over the place. You may even be her style. Well, she's always dressed to the T. Everything about her screams, look at me. Everybody thinks she's got it all together, 'cause she wants you to think she's strong as leather. She's really hurting, 'cause ain't nobody nowhere. No, she ain't gonna be showing the pain she hides inside. Keep on going.
This old road seemed to never end. This old road is my only friend. Sometimes we fight, I go left, and it turns